So on a Tuesday evening, at the moment, I will start to run again my classical drawing class, which is an academic drawing class, which I studied when I was a student in Florence. And you will be doing exercises like this, which take a couple of hours to do. This is the starting point, which is making copies of Charles Bargue drawings from his draw class, and they look like this. But as you do these drawings, you learn about observation, placement, construct, articulation, line weight. And we do several weeks of this using a plumb line, and I will give you resources for you to copy from and give you a list of the materials, should you be interested. That then will prepare you for what comes next, which we will begin to do figure drawings with rendering. So then you start to add form to the placement, construct, articulation, line weight stages. So there's 5 principles that you'll be looking at. And then from there, we go into Charles Bargue drawing course assignments, which will look something like this. And they're usually cast drawings taken from classical antiquities, such as Faustine here. And they're not traced. These are actually hand-drawn, and you'll be able to do that after following that course. Sorry, the camera's flipping out because it's trying to focus on both at once. And then from there, once you've mastered that, the drawing course then goes on to, we use photographic resources of models, and we produce similar drawings from the model. So these are actual drawings that we produced in the last class. We also intersperse this with looking at French and Italian masters. So this is Proudhon, and I've done several of these classes, and the students do really well because
okay, got it.
Drawings.
Sorry.
And it's usually a 4-week block of those in the drawing class. And that will then take you in towards the next stage, which will be, we look at painting. We start with a warm grisaille. So we do assignments in warm grisaille, cool grisaille, and then finally we go into classical painting. So I just thought I'd give you an indication of the option to improve your drawing. Once you've got your drawing to this level, you can, pretty much take on anything, I would say. And so that's Tuesdays. But on the Sunday, I do the watercolour classes, and that's what this is really about. So I will now share the screen for today's assignment, which will be this lovely scene from Vernazza. So if I just move this briefly to one side and replace with my board, hopefully this will dovetail in nicely. There we are, that should do. And I'll just share the other screen with you. And what I quite often do is I produce, there we go. I produce a value map, which, as you saw in the classical drawing there that I just advertised, you'll go into rendering tone. Now, when you're rendering tone, you need to know about the value map, and that works as well in color in paint as well. So I will be demonstrating the value map about halfway through this class. So as you can see from the image there, it's quite a busy scene. We've got all the classic ingredients from Vernazza and Italian streets. You've got washing lines, you've got awnings with heavy shadows. You've also got those beautiful shutters, and you've even got those sort of cantilever shutters where you can open little aspects of it. So that's fun. And there's even a figure thrown in as well. So we've got plenty to look at in terms of drawing. In terms of painting, it's actually very rich subject matter because you've got textures. You've got these oxide stucco walls with oranges, pinks, browns, greys, lots of grey. And you've got these ivory coloured awnings. You've got lovely bluish notes on the sheets and pillowcases. And then, of course, we've got a menagerie of T-shirts, vests and such, ranging from greys through to browns and even mauves. So that will be fun to paint. So where do we begin this challenge? Well, it begins with basic composition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little pencil now to show you a way that you can divide this to get the perspective straight away. So if I put an action line through there, which I would think seemingly on your page, and by the way, I'm using Fabriano Artistico today, which is a paper that is 100% cotton. They also manufacture the Winsor & Newton paper, I believe now, because that's no longer French made. And it's very similar to Winsor & Newton paper. It's quite heavy and it's got a nice texture. I'm just trying to increase the size of the screen for you. Liz has got a hand raised. Are you okay, Liz? Would you like to ask a question?
Sorry, we can't see the top of your hand on my screen.
Oh yeah, so that's where I'm drawing to. Okay. So I'm just trying. No worries, Liz.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to get the screen optimized for you. Now, I believe that if you're watching this on an iPad or a Mac, because this is Mac generated, you can click on any of these screens and you can make them smaller and bigger at your leisure. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, so I believe, on other computers, but there you are. It is what it is.
Oh.
Right. So that's my first line. Okay. Oh, and it's just moved down the screen as I've done that. So I'll just quickly do that again. Okay. As with the nature of all these live things, you're always at the mercy of technology. But there we are. So that's my first line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to replicate this line as a tilt on my screen here. So it's about 2/5 of the way up the page. And if I look at my page here, that would take me to there. I'll just make sure I'm fully focused on this. So one moment while yeah, I think that's as focused as it can be. So there we are. So that's about 2/5 of the way up. I might just stand up so I can see this a bit more clearly. And the tilt is roughly 14 minutes past the hour, something like that. So I just put a little line going across. Now, you don't need to do this very dark at all. Faint is pretty good as long as you can see it. I'm going a little bit darker because otherwise you may not be able to see it so clearly.
Right.
So there it is, a little bit darker. And I would say it's about 2/5 of the way up, not quite halfway. There's plenty more above than below. Okay. Now, once you've got that action line, then we don't hang about. We're going to draw another one. And this one, I'd like you just to imagine where the building plane, i.e. where the foundation meets the floor, and that's somewhere there. You see that? And so that's a little bit lower down again. Now, it's up to you how much pavement you wish to place in the foreground there. But it's roughly the same angle, 14 minutes past the hour, or just rolled on the clock down a little bit, say 14.5 minutes past the hour, something like that. So it's not quite quarter past. So be careful that you don't make it straight. Okay, so once you've got there, I'm just going to put the mute on just for a moment, just to keep out any noises from the background. There we go. So should be no noise in the background. And I'm just checking my angles. Yeah, that's about right. And then I'm going to start to divide this as well. So if you look, there's approximately 6 areas of windows. So there's a couple of smaller ones as well, but I'm really considering this area here with its window here, here, and these 2 above. So they're my main sort of windows I'm going to look at. This window will feature, as will this shutter, and we'll put it in, but I've got to be able to fit above my awning the next grouping. So I think that this is roughly 1/4 of the way down from the top of your page. And I'm just going to put another little line just to indicate where that is. This is where the sheets, the washing is going to hang down. So I'm kind of now constructing the composition in terms of action zones, which can be sort of action lines as well, like I'm showing there. But of course, these lines are only there to help me, a little bit like a sort of Mondrian frame, where I'm going to put my main subjects. So once you've got those areas of your composition pronounced, then we can start to look at the composition in sections. So I've got this big awning shape here, which is really basically a box. If you think about it as a box, that's not a bad idea. And if you can't see the box yet, you'll see it in a moment. I just clip a little bit off there, and I just see the box of the shop front there. That's the Enoteca. So I'm just going to really simplify this because I don't know what the drawing levels are of the participants. I know some of you will be able to start to draw the awning, but if you can't and you're worried about that, then just draw us basically a square, a box like so. And then from that, we can then start to add the awning as it sort of juts out from the building. And you'll see that during this process, I'll be using tilts. So I see a tilt. If I clear this all off, I see a tilt here. Do you see that? And I see a tilt here. Now, they kind of look parallel. They're not quite parallel, but they're close by to being parallel. They sort of converge slightly as they go towards the wall. But if you start off with a sort of parallel notion, it's not a bad idea. So that angle there is about 7 minutes past the hour. If you're out a minute or two, it doesn't really matter as long as you keep these both quite close to parallel. And as I mentioned, it probably converges inwards towards the wall. So what I mean by that is if these are parallel, let one swing in. You see that? Don't let them swing out though. That would look wrong, but this can look right, if you see what I mean. So good luck with that. And then we move on to the next window, because the shop front has a lot of levels of detail, and that's a square, an awning, and then a side awning, which just goes literally down like so. And then we've got the frame area for the shadows and what's in there as well. All of the things that that you'll find in the Enoteca. Okay, we'll draw that later once we've got everything else in its rightful position. Okay, hope that makes sense so far. Any questions, add it to the chat. There's also a button where you can raise your hand if you wish to get my attention straight away. Okay, so the next shape, there is another box. So next door to the Enoteca is the Bottega d'Arte. So this is another shop, has an awning. It's basically a rectangle. So give yourself a little space between the Enoteca and then you have this rectangle here. Now this rectangle also has an awning, but you'll see from this viewpoint that the awning is almost vertical on that line. I say almost, not quite. So I start with a small tilt, maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes past the hour. And I then make a little bit of a dog's back leg there. You know, you bend that angle because the awning has this flap at the front, which provides more shade. And there we go. So I've got that little fold there, and I've also got the overhang. Okay, but you notice that this angle is not quite as steep as that angle there. Okay, that's a good place to begin. Now, of course, you could go into the details, such as the window, the doors, the bottles, the things that are for sale, the baskets, etc. But we don't need to. And I would say, please don't just yet, because it might well be, as the drawing progresses, you need to change things. So at this stage, it's basic shapes. Okay. Right. So where do we go next? Well, next we have to establish the height of this window here. Now, these two windows are set on the same perspective line. Okay. Now, if you've had problems with perspectives before, don't worry. It's something I focus on in the classes. It's one of the principles. But for the benefit of a drawing like this, I just use a tilt because we don't need to see another side plane of the building. We just need to work out the angle that this building is moving away from us, and it's moving away down to the left. So if I draw a line again, for this one, it's quite straightforward. It's 14 minutes past the hour, and I've left a little bit of space for this window to occupy somewhere there. And don't worry too much if you're a little bit left or right of the line. It doesn't matter, honestly, because that's not the issue. The issue will be, have you left enough space for the washing line to exist underneath that window? And if you have, well done. And if you haven't yet and you're not sure, don't worry, place it where you think it should be. And then later, which will be quite soon, we will see if you can fit the washing in. So I'm just doing 2 rectangles, like so, leaving a bit of space on the wall between the 2 windows, one here and then one there. Now, in Italy, of course, you probably know the windows have a particular proportion which favors height over width, which is good because that's what gives you those lovely tall looking shutters there. And once you feel that, yep, I think I've got what I need, you can erase that guideline. And now I've got 2 similar sized rectangles coming towards me from left to right. Okay, this is a little bit closer, this one. Right, and then I can move upwards. So I'll give you some time to get there. And just to give you a little bit of advice, if you've got a big brush like this, just sweep away your eraser burrs as you progress, because they do make a mess if you leave them there when we paint. Okay, so then I need to think about the next window, which is vertically above the 2 windows we've drawn. So I put those plumb lines in so that you can work out where they're situated above, like this. So they run up directly above, and again, they sort of tilt away from us, turn away from us, going down to the left or up to the right. It's how you want to see it. But unlike the first windows that we drew, you cannot see the window sill on this particular one because there's a sheet in front of it, but you might be able to see it on the next one. Probably don't see the full length of the window. I'm probably clipping a little bit off. My objective, I feel, in this one is getting the atmosphere of the shop and the street and that washing line and a little bit of the shutters. So if you're finding that you have to crop things because your format's not quite the same, I think that's absolutely fine, as long as you have space for the washing line, at least one of them, because that'll be fun. Okay, that's one of our challenges in this particular painting. So now I've got the 4 windows, as it were, sort of placed. I can now think about these particular windows here on the side. These are not the main focuses, but they do provide that sort of group pattern that feels right. And it adds to the authenticity of the mood. So I put them in. It doesn't take much, but you'll see they're out of sequence because it's a different house. It's a different building. So these ones are sort of lower, and they're still going away from us to the left. So they still have a very similar sweeping angle of about just before 1/4 past, not quite 14 minutes past, somewhere there. I'll do the same up here. And I get a little bit looser with these ones because they're not so important. And they could be an inch or 2 below or above. Who would know? And does it really matter? Not really. So there we are. I've got the shop front sorted as a sort of basic composition. I hope that's clear and making sense to you. And now I'm looking at it and I think, oh, I could just straighten that up a little bit. And this is why it's important not to go into detail too soon, because as you compare, everything that you've put in has a bearing on the next thing. So rather than go into detail too soon, it's a wise move to get your composition sorted out like this. Very simple blocks. Sometimes it's blocks, sometimes it's other shapes. But when you're happy, then we are ready to go into detail. Okay, so I clear off everything on the screen. There we go. And now I'm going to take on the washing lines because they're one of the main subject matters of this classic Italian sort of holiday town scene. So you'll see that the washing line is kind of built on these metal ties, which are sort of bolted into the wall. And then there's lines sort of suspended across like this. It's probably little pulleys so that the person putting the washing out can pull those shapes towards them. So that's where I'm going to start. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to fashion a little hooking device there to, and they're very interesting as well because what they do is they provide that atmosphere we need, but they also provide shadows on the wall, which are different types of shadows to the shutter shadows. They're thinner. So I think they're very relevant in the scene. So I draw those lines in, and later on I may use a little bit of gouache or something to paint their light tones in. I will make some suggestions when the moment comes. And as I draw this one, I think, oh, I need to put the shutters on because the shutter has some width that I've not expressed yet. So there's a shutter, and oh, it means I can bring my washing line further across to the left. So again, another reason why you start off drawing. Drawing is something that's a changing journey that you shouldn't commit to too soon. You know, you're always developing your drawing through until you're ready to paint. So there's my sheet there hanging down. There's some rhythms in the sheet, but I see it as a basic envelope shape. You see that? That's very important. And then I've got 2 pillowcases, it looks like to me, and they are sort of hanging on a thread as well. One's behind the sheet, but it's sort of blowing in the breeze a little bit. So there's a bit of curvature to that one. I kind of like that because that gives an implied feeling of movement. Always a good thing when you're painting from photographs and the real scene. So there's the next pillowcase. I like the fact that they're not both white. One's a bit blue, lavendery color, which will be great. So it didn't take much to get those basic shapes in. and then we can move on gradually to the next area. Okay. I'll give you a little bit of time to get there. Now, if you've already got to there, you could start to, if you wish, put details such as the, you know, the mullions on the windows, if you're seeing them, and that dividing frame to the window there. All of these things we can paint, but you could have a go at drawing them straight away. And as I move down now, because I feel that you're probably at that point, you're ready for this, I'm looking at the next washing line, which is a similar sort of Heath Robinson affair of pulleys and cables to these bolted on things in the wall. So there's some kind of fixing coming out of the wall. It'll probably be a little iron bar that they've drilled and bashed in, and it's fixed with some cement or something, and it then is hanging below the window, which is exactly where it's needed. So there is a slight curvature, like a little frown, going across from left to right or right to left, however you favor your drawing. And then I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 washed t-shirts and jerseys and things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, you can draw 7 if you wish. You can do as many as you feel you want to do. I'm just going to space mine going across. Now, again, they will need that slight curved feeling. So wherever your line that you've drawn is curving to, make sure that your t-shirts and shirts, whatever you're drawing, also follow that curve to some degree. Right, so we're going to put the shadows on as well, but we just want them to hang with a little bit of that credible feeling of gravity. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. How much detail you need, again, it's entirely up to your style of watercolors. I kind of keep it as simplistic as I can, but sometimes in an area where it's not so easy to explain with minimal drawing shapes, I might put, say, a little curve for the neck there in the vest. So then it just feels more correct, but I won't be doing buttons, that's for sure, and anything like that. But I might put a little curve, you know, where the pegs will spread left to right on the vestment. So there we are. That's a case now of just crafting your washing as it hangs on the line. Some V-necks, some round necks. You can imagine that this has been done with a little bit of love from maybe from the wife of the fisherman. It looks all like it's men's shirts to me. Very publicly displayed. There's like literally tens of thousands of people coming and going on a day like this. And it's so nice to be able to look up and see everyday things amongst all the tourism. And that's what makes this so authentic, I think. Now, going back to themes, I tend to do a lot of themes from Italy because I do residential courses here from my website, paintingholidayitaly.com. I go to Cinque Terre, I go to Florence, just come back from Sorrento, and we went to Positano. It's really gorgeous places to paint, where I paint exclusively watercolors. So you're very welcome to join me on any of those trips if you so wish. It'd be great to see you. And there we are. So there's I'll probably put one or two more than I should have done, but we'll see if that fits in a moment. I'll give you a moment to get there because we're going to go into detail on the underneath the awnings. And then I'll come back to putting the shadows in. But if you feel inclined to start putting shadows in, please feel free. But the next place I'm going to go to actually is the woman who's shopping. I just want to have a quick look at her because my camera is a bit far, my screen's a little bit further away. Just pull that in so I can see her a bit more. But I'm going to clear off the drawings that I put on the screen. There we go. So when you're doing figures, it's always a good idea to put figures in because it gives a little bit of context of scale, helps with the proportions, and it can also give it a more human feel because these places can look a little bit lonely without it. But when you've got a street scene like this with washing, it's not necessary. I would say this is the sort of scene you can get away without figures because the actual inference from the washing is that there's people about. But I'm going to put a figure in anyway because then it gives you a feeling of tourism as well. I've only put one in. I did have photographs. It was hard actually to get one person because I took so many photos just trying to get one person. Usually there's about a group of 4 or 5 people and it just makes it too busy. So she is underneath the awning on the right, as you can see. So I'm going to put a little plumb line, just like we would do in the drawing classes on the Tuesday night. I put a line from the neck down, like so, and you can see that that line, that's the plumb line, goes through her left leg. So I start off with a line. And then about halfway, you'll find from the top of her head, maybe a little bit higher up than halfway, you'll find her waistline. And this is important because it's better to make the legs a little bit longer than the torso and the head. So I'm just dividing this figure. Now, if you've never drawn figures before and you're really worried about it, you could draw a carrot person like this. So here's a carrot person. So you just draw a carrot and then you put a head on it. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to resist the carrot person today. And I'm going to go into basic shapes. So now you've got the idea with the plumb line and the basic divisions. I'm going to zoom in just so that we can see the woman on the, I think she's on the phone or talking to a friend or something. She's just got her hand up, covering her face a little bit there. So there she is. If I zoom in a bit more, we get a full, there you go, that's better to see. So remember that was her waistline there. That's her feet. And so now I put gesture lines in. So this is how I would do it if I'm there. I tend to teach carrot people, but I favor myself doing gestures. So this is a gesture. So the legs are kind of like Simon Templar, you remember the saint, sort of shapes like this. So I know that the left leg is the line of the plumb line. So the right leg comes slightly in front and down, like so. And then I'm going to draw her body, which is a bell shape. That's a good way of describing it. Sort of like that. Imagine a belt there. No, sorry, not a belt, a bell. So like a church bell. There it is. And it comes down below the waist because she's got a blue blouse that's sort of covering that. So draw a sort of a thinnish bell shape coming down below the waist, like so. That should help. And now notice that her head is slightly over on the right. Do you see that? It's a shape. So I had this plumb line going up and I'm now going to push her head slightly over to the right and place that on. And it's like a bucket. Not trying to be rude there, but a bucket is a good sort of way of drawing it, or a smaller bell shape if you want to see it that way. So there it is. And then back into this idea of the gesture. Remember, I was showing you this sort of line like Simon Templar. There we go. You've got the the symbol from the saint. We've also got a gesture for the arm here, which is, it's a V shape. See that? A little V. And it's coming out to the side. I'm going to draw it exactly as I see it. In reality, if I was drawing now, I'd probably choose a slightly more interesting shopping pose, but this will work. It'll be fine. Now, once you've got that, it's like a stick man with a bell-shaped body, then you can start to put a little bit of shape on the thighs. So sort of triangular thighs, aren't they? They're kind of a little bit thicker thighs. Like so. And the legs taper in as they descend. Put a little bit of curvature on the calves. And believe it or not, that's pretty much enough. So I just erase. That I no longer need, which is quite a bit of it, to be honest. It's like so. So there we are. Now her arm needs the same treatment. So from the sort of shoulder down to the bicep, it's a little bit thicker, stronger, I guess, in width than the forearm, which, if I clear off the drawing on the screen there we go. You can see that her forearm tapers as well, gets thinner as it gets towards her face. Not quite sure what she's doing, but I'm going to give my person a phone, because sometimes you capture somebody probably, I don't know, cleaning something out of their eye. That's not such a good idea for a theme in your painting. So I just put phone there and a little bit more shape to the shoulder, turning the bell shape into something a bit more feminine. And there we are. Got my lady ready to paint. So hope that's helping you to do your figure. And now I'll just drop back now to the original format on the photograph, so you can see and compare. So there she is. Now, you don't get a lot of time to hang about when you're drawing. So your next point is to start to put more detail. We've got the washing sort of basically blocked in. We've got our windows blocked in. Wouldn't matter where you go next, but for sake of argument, I would just say, let's look at the shape of the shadows on the building here. So I'm going to suggest we try to draw in the shadow shape. It sort of curves out, as you'd expect. It's cast from the awning. So this is the shadow shape, and that's all much darker, isn't it? And there's two like little flags or something I've just spotted underneath the awning. It's the first time I've really noticed that. Anyway, you can put those in or not. It's up to you. So I'll just now start to shape my shadow. And this is important because, as well as the images, the shapes of the subjects, such as the awning in positive, we've also got this sort of negative shape of the shadow as it's cast. So that's very useful to put that in. It's going to give us an indication of where our paint for the shadow will sit. And there's another one, you see, on this shadow, there's a curve, a little wave. Interesting, that. Could work very well as a different type of shape. So I put that wave in. And then the shadow shape for this building is in, and for this awning as well. So there's 2 shadow shapes. Doesn't take long, does it, once you start to whittle away at them? And that moves the eye nicely then back up to the washing, because that all needs a shadow. Now, very often in these sort of shadow shapes that are grouped together, like shadows of several jerseys or whatever, you've got a shape that is easier to express like so. So we just kind of combine it. So if you're not quite sure what I mean by that, you'll see as hopefully as I create this, there's a little gap here between the first shirt here and the start of the shadow. Do you see there's a little, just emphasize it with the green pen. Just there, do you see that? And then just below it, maybe not quite the same angle, it's just moving a little bit as the shadow goes through, but there it is, it's very similar. First shadow. And then the next shadow, slightly different yet again. And I just carry on knitting, as it were, these shadow shapes together like carriages on a train. They're just sort of carrying on one after the next. Very similar shapes. Every now and then you get a bit of a difference. This one's got a sort of a V in the shadow. That's nice. That's a bit different. And it gives that feeling of a subtle difference. But hopefully the idea will be that when we come to paint these, they will just give the depth that this really needs. And when you're studying shadows like this, a good I would say a good thing to do is to compare the tone of the shadow with the object that's casting it. Obviously, it's likely to be darker. The principle is the sunlight is on the face of the subject that's cast, and so the shadow is darker. But sometimes there's a temperature difference, and that might surprise you. So look at the temperature of the shadow. Sometimes there's also a tonal difference. For example, imagine if, it's not in this case, but it could be, that you've got a thin linen shirt or something next to a very heavy woolen jumper. They're going to have a slight difference in their shadow densities. So you might pick up on that as you're looking at the shadows. And there's also light bouncing around because not too far from the water. So you get this wonderful feeling of, bounce light, reflected light, all those good things that watercolorists enjoy to paint. I see a raked shadow here. Not quite sure from the image what's creating this shadow. It's probably a sign hanging above the shop there. You see it's a very interesting abstract shape. And I would recommend putting those sort of things in, because what they do is they just give a certain element of atmosphere of that raking sunlight, tells you where the light direction is as well. And so that shape I'm putting in, definitely. Just checking I'm getting the angle of it correct, because every now and then, if you're sitting down at home drawing like I am, it does give you a bit of a false reading. It's much better when you're there in the flesh, as it were. But of course, it's still a great thing to paint in your studio. So every now and then you stand up, look at your angles and check that, yeah, indeed, that's correct, or no, change that if it's not. And then I look at that locked in shape here and I just check. There are some little episodes like here where there's a chink of light, maybe from a the shadow where they cross, maybe where the arms of the shadow, the shirts sort of let the light through. And there we are. So that's ready. Now, we will be then moving on to the shadows from the sheets above. So you've probably got an idea now which direction the light's coming from. And it's quite interesting, really, that the light, it was about 1 o'clock. So the sun has moved overhead just slightly, perhaps a degree or two like this, 2 or 3 minutes past the hour, and it's beating down from the right. So you're getting this shadow that's creeping forward just ever so slightly from the on the floor plane. But as it's sort of casting from closer to us, sort of like that, it's above this woman's head. You can see that because she's got rim light on the top of her head. It's lighter there. So the shadows are slightly over to the left, but almost directly below as well, because at midday, the sun's above your head. By 1 o'clock, it's slightly moving over to the right, okay, in this scene. So try to keep your shadows consistent to that pattern. Right, and then once you've got that, then moving over to the sheets. The sheet has a shadow that sort of comes from the side there. And as I say, it's slightly to the left, the shadow is being cast, and it's got this billowing shape. It's very rounded, a little curvature, like so. That's my shadow shape. I like to see there's some little curves in the sheet there. I make that a little bit darker so I can see the separation from the sheet and the shadow. There's also a nice little episode where there's a highlight on the sheet itself, where just about there's a little blast of light, which then tucks into that shadow shape below. And then if you follow your eye, you'll see that there is another little billowing shadow shape here from the breeze on the sheet there. And that looks okay to me. That's not bad. And then I have to think about the shadow shape within the sheet. So it might be an idea just to put a bit of tone like this, not very heavy. Don't do it too heavy because you want to cover that with paint, so that you know that that is the shadow, because this is a cast shadow and we're now going to look at form shadow. These are two different types of shadow, and form shadow, although very often it is a similar density, it really depends on the material that it's formed upon. So form shadow on a white sheet like this is very light, you'll see. So I just want to make a little note of that. And you'll probably see that the billowing nature of a sheet that's in the breeze, I think it's blown a little bit to the side, has a curve like this, like a curtain hanging. And then as it sort of turns here, you can represent the form by capturing the form shadow. So you see what I'm doing? I'm copying that green line I've just drawn as a little moment there that I'm going to be enjoying painting later. How much more of that shadow you need? Well, we'll see as we move to painting. But for now, I'm quite happy with that. It's a little bit of a shadow up there, but most of this at the top there is in the light, so that's good. Luckily, these two pillowcases don't have too much form shadow, but there is a little bit on this one. It's a little bit of a curve, like a big C shape there that has a bow in it like that. So I just draw that, and that will represent, you know, the curve that the wind and the gravity is having an effect upon that sheet. sheet, it's a pillowcase. And there we are. And then their cast shadows hang down immediately behind and below, and they are to the left slightly. So while you're drawing out, what I want you to do in your mind's eye is connect the shadow shape to the object that's casting it. And then when you come to paint it, you see, you're going to be better versed then in knowing exactly where you are in the painting. And you'll also notice subtle things like the shadow of the line itself. So we have the real line, which is lightest, which I'll paint later in gouache. But then we have the painted, the cast line, which is the shadow on the wall. So that's going to be fun. It also is cast onto the shutter, which is slightly open. So whoever's in the house has closed the shutter a little bit to block a little bit of the light. And so these shutters are slightly ajar. So I do that to that one, and then I can move on to these little hinged smaller shutters within the main shutter. You have these little openings. There's quite a lot in this one, isn't there, when you start to look at it? And you could simplify it, that's for sure. You could take some of these things, these elements out, but I'm going to leave them in. I think they look really lovely and just gives me more of that classic Italian feeling of detail within detail. And so if you have got through those sheets, the pillowcases, their shadows, then drop down, do your shutters. You don't have to do the little slots in the slats of the shutters. We can paint that or not, depending on how you want to interpret it. Certainly don't need to draw it unless that's something you like to do. It's your sort of mode, then do it, but you won't necessarily need it. And then there's a shadow from these blinds that are open and they're cast. And it's similar to this one. It's a raking shadow. That's what we call that when it goes off on a slight diagonal. And these diagonals, they have a good positive impact upon watercolor, because it's these sort of diagonal shadows which will enliven that space, give you depth, give an illusion of form. And we use all the tools in the box that we can. So why not put them in if they're there? Now, I'm just going into a little bit more detail on these little shutters that open with shutters within them. If you want to leave it out, it won't make much difference. But I've just put them in. And there we are. So I did leave a shadow up here out, so I quickly sketched that in. Just as an indication of where I'm at, there's a shadow here that is just below that shutter there. And it's a funny looking toothy shaped thing. So I put that in because, again, it makes a nice contrast or counterpoint to the raked shadows. It's got a bit of a diagonal. It's more square edged, so that goes in as well. And I'll just put a bit of tone on it like that. Sometimes I do that when there's a complicated shadow shape, especially when I'm teaching, just to show you where the shadows are so that when we come to paint, we don't forget, okay? But it's not a heavy shadow that I'm putting in. You see, I just put a little bit of tone. You can even put it there, but it's not necessary. Right, so I'll give you a moment to get there. And take a little drink, because we're going to go into the Enoteca, and we're going to look at foreground details. Plenty of detail, isn't there, in this one? So if you like your detail, this painting is definitely going to be fun for you. If you're terrified of detail, well, don't worry. I'm going to keep it as loose as I can, you'll see. So I'm going to now move downwards into this area, and I will abstract it to a point, hopefully, that makes it more simple to understand. So with that in mind, what I do on the screen is zoom in so that you can see what's going on inside the Enoteca a little bit. There we are. And I draw your attention to the highlights. This time we've got raked highlights. So that's something else. So it's almost a counterpoint again to those raked shadows, but you see them like little blasts, diagonal episodes of light. They're just lovely. And let me just check what that is. I think it might be, I'm not quite sure. It could be some scented candles or something. I'm not sure what they are, but little yellow things in a bucket which are picking up, maybe they're bars of soap, not sure what they are, but they're picking up the light hitting them. So I'll bring that to your attention because they are lights, whereas everything else is in the shadow. Now, the biggest shapes in this is the doorway through, which, if we look at it, it's a rectangle, of course. There it is. That's where it gets quite a bit darker, doesn't it? And then there's a step, 1, 2, and then you're in. So that's how I see the division of that plane, that space. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the Mondrian again. So here we go. Basic outlines of the shape that we're dealing with. That's a dark. Gets quite a bit darker in there. You can see things in there though, can't you? You can see sort of, it's probably t-shirts for sale, sort of on the inside. So I'll just draw a couple of those things. And then there's the step. 1, 2. I'll make it really easy because they're just lighter shapes in the dark. So they're not really lights, they're still darks. And then we have shelves outside. So somebody's built some kind of shelf here. There's all sorts of little, probably bottles of, I can imagine, olive oil or lemon, cello. There's all sorts of things in there, and little baskets full of tourist souvenirs. And then you've got all of these little baskets down here. I will simplify this just to basic shapes, but it's important to notice that as a group of patterns, these baskets are running on a track, on a line, which is just in front of the shadow line down here. So there's 5 of them, isn't there? So whether you put 5, 6, doesn't matter. Whatever fits, it could be, couldn't it? And that's the way I see it. I've got it that way. And there they are, my little baskets. And then above it, a few more little bowls of stuff in there. And the important thing is they are just a little bit lighter. Now, in truth, you could paint these rather than draw them. But I know it's going to be daunting for anyone who is a beginner to even understand what those shapes are and draw them, let alone paint them as values. So what I'm doing is just creating a sort of a simplistic shop frontage here with lots of little linear groupings like this on shelves. And hopefully that in itself will explain, because we see this sort of thing all the time. And it just kind of makes sense. So there it is. That's my shop front. Not going to write Enoteca schiacciatura on there. I could do, but I'm going to paint that. You'll see. So I clear that, and I want to make a little note of the highlights. So there's one there, they're diagonal, they're catching the corners of things as they go up. And there we are. So I've got an idea of where those blasts of light are. And then over here, as I mentioned before, there's these two barrels. They look like little barrels full of like lemon type colored things, maybe soap bars, candles or something. So I just draw them and I'll make those light up because they're slightly forward, and a few abstract shapes here and there. And I'm pretty much ready to paint. So there we go. So what I do at this point is I have a good look, see if there's anything I missed, because likely I did. So it might be, oh yeah, there's a little sack truck and a window with a metal grating. That could be fun to paint. Don't need them. It's not necessary. But if you like your detail, why not put it in? So that's what I'm going to attempt to do now. I'm going to put the little sack truck, two little wheels like this, a little steel frame like that, and two little handles. And there you go. You have a sack truck. The window that's sort of iron bars, that's a bit different. It's just another rectangle, yet again. And that rectangle has a grid. So what's a grid? It's basically iron bars like so, and there we go. So that's all done on that side. And then if I zoom out again, let's see. Oh yes, there's some notice boards, sale boards, prices. So I'll zoom in into the Bottega d'Arte, which is where the lady is. You can see the wavy pattern a bit better of the shadow now, but I'm just going to draw two window shapes, and I'll find a way of painting that. I don't need to draw the details. I think we've got the idea there. Okay. So now I zoom out again, and I'll pause the video briefly just to see if everybody's okay before I go into paint, where I will be explaining the colors I'm going to be using within this demo. So I'm going to pause the video now just to now I'm going to share the screen just of my paints and picture that I'm drawing for now, so I can go through the colors. Now, this is a larger palette than usual because I've just come back from Sorrento, so I'm using a one I had lying about because I haven't unpacked my palette. But there is a cadmium yellow, which is a usual color, but you might have lemon yellow. Any yellow will do. This is permanent rose. That is not a standard color. If you don't have permanent rose, don't worry. You could use this color, alizarin crimson. That is a standard color. I also have cadmium orange, but you don't need it. As long as you've got a warm red, which is cadmium red here. So yellow and warm red. Alizarin crimson, which is the cool red. Now, whatever standard greens that you have in your set will do, because I can help you with greens if you have a different green, but it's likely you're going to have either a sap green, an emerald green, or most likely this green here, which is viridian. So viridian green is a difficult green, but actually it's the green you want for this painting. So that's part of the reason I chose this, because it's a standard green, this scene. Now over here, I've got my earth colors. Oh, sorry, I didn't mention the blues. Now I've got French ultramarine blue, which is usually a standard. But if you've got cerulean blue, that's a nice color for mixing in your shadows. So if you've got that, well done, you could use that. But if you don't worry, any blue will do, especially French ultramarine blue, which is your standard blue. Then I've got over here, this is raw sienna, looks like yellow ochre. If you don't have raw sienna, that's not a standard color, you'll have yellow ochre. Yellow ochre will be fine for those oxide walls that we're seeing. It'll be a good color. You'll also probably have burnt sienna, which is a standard color, and burnt umber. And then you'll likely have lamp black or ivory black, but I've got Payne's grey. That's what I'm using for my black. But you could use neutral tint if you have neutral tint. And like you say, any black will do. And I've also got violet. You may not have violet. It's probably not standard in all sets, but if you've got a red and a blue, you'll be able to mix it. So there you are. Any questions about the colors, let me know. Now over here, I've got my brushes, and a standard sort of brush that you could buy quite cheaply for about £10, and it's quite a good little brush, is Daler's Aquafine Round 12. That will get you through most of this painting. In fact, you could do the whole painting with this brush. But I'm using a Kolinsky Sable, which is an expensive brush, but it's what Daler have kind of in mind when they've produced this economic version. If you have a rigger brush, which is a long thin brush like this, that would be a good brush to use for shadows and things on the lines. And a number 6 round would be good. If you've got those brushes, great. I've also got this brush, which is a flat 1 inch thick, wide, sorry, medium hake brush. And that's what I'll use. If you don't have this brush, any flat brush will do, even synthetic flats will be fine. So there's the brushes. Any questions, let me know. And you'll need a bucket of water and an atomizer. Atomizers come in all shapes and sizes. I am using this one, which is a horticultural one, because it's really good for spraying up your colors, getting them ready and active. Now I'm using tube paints. These are Winsor & Newton, but any paints will do. If you've got half pans, just make sure you give them an extra spray to activate them before we go into paint. And I'm going to get a bucket of water. It'll be 1 moment and we can begin. So there's my bucket of water. You'll need either a paper towel or some cloth. I've got an old cloth that I use. This is quite an important cloth because it allows me to dry my brush a little bit here and there. So my first wash, I'm going to start with a tea wash. Now, when I talk about washes, I'll talk about the thicknesses of the wash, and I produce a 5-value map for my classes, so I will be using 5 values of wash. So this is a light middle value. So I better get you a value strip. 1 moment so that I can show you what I mean. There we go. So in a value strip, you will have a light, a dark, and a middle value. As well as those 3 values, you'll also have a light middle value, which is next to your middle value, and a dark middle value the other side, getting close to your darks. Okay, so I split my painting into 5 values. The reason being is that it's easier to understand the process if I show you it this way, and I do it with every class, and it really backs up your understanding of the process. You'll see. So I'm going to share another screen with you right now, which is the value map. So let me see which one it is. It's this one here, and I'll post all 3 on the screen for you now. Now you may not be able to see the value map one, so I'll bring that forward. There you go. So now you can see the same scene that we just drew out, but this time in black and white, because it's easy just to see it as a value. And you can see each zone varies in tone. So for example, the lightest tones are easiest to spot, I guess. So let's go there. So this awning is a light, and on the top of this awning is a light. But do you notice as they turn slightly down away from the light, the overhang is a light middle value. So it's this value here. Same with that one. Same with the side, that's a light middle value. Same with the sheets, except for the top of the sheets, there is a light. So it's the white of the paper pretty much. Coming from there, we have a mixture of light middle values on the wall, ranging then to middle values. So there's a lot of light middle value and middle value. The shutters themselves are green, and they range from middle value to dark middle value. Same with the shadow shapes down here. There are some areas underneath the awnings which are dark middle value, and then you'll get dark accents in the shadow. So for example, the window shapes down here, the doorway there, remember, that's a dark accent. A dark accent is probably the smallest percentage of any painting in the outside during daylight hours, but they are there. You just have to look for them, and if you squint, you will see them. Like, for example, the gaps underneath these shutters where they've opened, there's a dark accent. Same up here with the shutters which are open. There's the little slots, you know, the French sort of shutter style. You've got those little slots, and they're in shadow because they're away from the light, adjacent to the light. So there you go. That's an introduction to the value map system. And we're going to start off thinking about the light. The light is on the sheet there, and the light is on the awning here and here. A little bit of rim lighting, funnily enough, on the lady's trousers and her arm. So we don't paint there. These are areas that we reserve the lights within. And then we add around it our light middle value tones, which is our first wash, which I'm mixing this tea wash for now. So I hope that makes some kind of sense, because we're going to use this system throughout. What I'll do is I'll put the little picture of the value map above. So I shrink it down. There it is. And I'll bring the color one forward, because obviously we need to see quite a bit on this. But I believe that if you do have an apple, as I say, you can move these things wherever you want them to be. Right, so I'll move that down. And here goes with first mix. So plenty of water. So it's going to be a very, very thin, watery tea wash. And this is raw sienna. If you don't have raw sienna, you could use yellow ochre. How much do you need? Well, you need enough to cover the page that you're working on. Some of you probably have A4, maybe A3. This is around about a quarter sheet, which is about A3, a bit bigger. And as well as this wash, which I think I now have plenty of mixture for, I'll need a wash for the ground plane, And some of the wall as well is grey. Have you noticed? It's not just a sort of yellowy note. So I'll mix up some grey. Now, like I say, just for this week, I'm going to use, I'm going to keep it simple. You can use your lamp black or your ivory black or whichever grey you've got. Now, I happen to have Payne's grey. So I'm going to mix up quite a bit of that. But I'm keeping it thin, you'll see. And now I pick up with my big brush some of the yellow tone that I was talking about, the raw sienna, and I'm going to start to brush this through pretty much everywhere in the painting, apart from the reserved lights. Do you remember where they are? That's the sheets and these awnings down here and the ladies' trousers. So here goes, I just paint the, and it's so thin, you'll probably think, oh, I can't even see the color. Even better, it needs to be thin because we want to reserve lights. So I just paint this through around my sheets. I can go through the shadows. And then as I get to about halfway, which is pretty much where I'm at now, if I run out, I can just mix another. It's so easy because you just have to think very, very thin tea wash, not Irish builder's tea. I think as strong as that. And you just bring this wash around. There's not, these t-shirts, none of those are as white as the sheet, so you can go through those, that's okay. But when you get down to the awning, just be a little bit careful. We don't need to paint all of the awning in this. We can just paint the front there, like so, where it folds down. And then we go straight down to the ground, through the shadows, because there's nothing in the shadow shape there that is lighter than this wash. So that can all be painted in as well. And I'll even put a bit of this tone, very thin, warm tone, through the stone cobbles. Because if you look at those well, flagstones, you look at those flagstones and you'll see, yeah, they're grey, they're cool. But actually, when you really look in the gaps, there's a sort of warm tone, isn't there? And that's what I'm going to be hopefully creating with a little bit of that warm tone washed through. Right, so that was good. We've got that sorted. And now, while it's still wet, we've now gone from the driest state of the book, the paper, now to the wettest state. It's so wet now that when we add a tone, like I'm going to do now, there's some grey. As I add this grey, what you'll see is it'll sort of sit and maybe start to activate. It shouldn't bloom. If yours is blooming, it's because it's too thin. Maybe then you might want to add a little bit more tone to it. But I'm just putting a little bit of this grey because I feel that there's some grey on that wall. And you'll probably see it. If you look, you'll see that this area down here, especially below the t-shirts and things, that's quite grey. So this is the second stage, I guess, of the tea wash, because what I'm trying to do is I'm adding a little bit of that distressed texture. And I'll also start to think about those flagstones as they sort of come towards me. So I'll put a little bit of that grey across the ground. And then I'm thinking about how these flagstones come towards me, almost like little steps. So do you see what I'm doing? I'm just having fun with my size 12 brush, bringing some of these shapes towards me in a very loose manner, very loose indeed. So that's the first stage. While that is settling in, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean my brush, dry my brush and then soften some of these areas. Now, I know I've reserved my lights here, and if you hadn't and you made a mistake and you could just lift it out anywhere there's a mistake and then just clean and dry your brush like that. But I'm just tickling the edge here as that that awning turns downwards. So that's what I'm trying to capture there. And when you're ready, we can move on to the next mix. So what's the next mix? Well, the next mix is I'm thinking about some of these oxide tones, which are on the wall here. And they're kind of burnt sienna tone. So if I add a little bit of burnt sienna to my raw sienna, I'll get a stronger tea mix now. If I add a little bit of cadmium red to it or orange, that looks good. That looks very nice. And I might add a bit of permanent rose or alizarin crimson if that's what you've got. And let's see how that looks when we brush that onto the stucco on the side of the wall. Now, when you look at the stucco, it seems like the weather has eroded parts of it, which of course it has. So you can be quite loose with it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does change color. I've noticed over here, it's sort of an orangey red, warm red, and over here, it's more of a pinky cool red. So I react to these sort of subtle changes. And the way to do that is add a little bit more crimson. Now, crimson is a strong color, as you can see. So crimson, and that there is burnt sienna, and maybe a touch of gray into that. So this is my Payne's Grey, and that's going to give me a kind of distressed oxide. You know, it's a pigment that they put into the rendering here. And I think it's going to go there. Just there. All the way down to my washing line. Somewhere there. And then you might see a little bit of it here and there in little episodes. And that's starting to capture the feel of some of those distressed areas on the wall. But again, it's very loose, it's very light wash. It's kind of between tea and coffee thickness now. So the next wash goes a little bit stronger, that's all. Now this is raw sienna, and if I make a coffee thickness tone, so this is my raw sienna into that pink and into that burnt sienna, I just put it all in there. Add a little bit of yellow maybe, because there's some warm yellow light down here in underneath the shadow for sure. So I can put that all the way through underneath my awning. Not painting my character, I've got to try to paint around the character. So I'm reserving the character for now. And I tend to do that quite a lot. If I see a lighter shape, I'll reserve it. But I also see a little bit of this golden brown tone between the objects in the other shot. So I can do that there. I can put that into the shadows. And although you're probably thinking, well, it looks darker to me, it will go darker, but let's try to capture a little bit of the color notes as well between the objects. And if you recall, there was an area inside those shadows where there's a raking light coming through. So those areas we need to reserve. So if you've painted into them, it's not a problem. We just lift those out. So for that, you'll need a synthetic brush like this. the synthetic flat is best, but I've got a small brush here which will do it. I just clean my brush and I lift out anywhere where I think the light's hitting the object, and I've redrawn the lights now. That's called lifting out. And while I'm there, I might as well just put some blasts of sunlight, so a little bit of neat orange there, right next to that highlight. That'll really look great once I've framed the dark. And then these lemons or candles or whatever that is in those barrels, they're reserved too. So what did I do? I just lifted out the lights, and I'm going to add a little bit of lemon color around the edge, just like so. So there's a blast of yellow light in there now. And I'm getting quite close now to moving to my next stage. So what's happening? Well, my paper is now going from very wet to damp. So it's gradually starting to dry. And when it's drying like this, it's a perfect state to get soft edges, which is what I'm after. So I watch the paper as it changes, and I can see if I touch it, it's wet. So that can do two things. It can create a perfect soft edge, or it could create an area that I didn't want to bleed outwards. So you've got to think about the humidity of your paper. When it is very wet, it kind of pulls the paints outwards. And as it's moist, it'll keep them localized, but give them a soft edge. So that's what I'm waiting for. But while I'm waiting for that, I can lay in my greens because I've got green shutters. So let's do that because that would make sense. Now, for the greens, I'm going to use Viridian because that's a standard color. If you don't have Viridian, whichever green you have, add some blue to it. And I'd recommend adding a bit of black or gray just to make it a gray green. Even a little bit of burnt sienna can help because it's the opposite to green, and it will just gray it slightly. And then add a bit of water, make it coffee thickness, may as well be coffee, may as well just go for it. And coffee thickness is now moving towards the middle values. So this is slightly darker, slightly stronger, and I'm just going to put that in its place. Just checking it's got the color that I want. And you can play with that color. If it's too green, you can add a little bit of red to it, which will neutralize it. And I just paint two streaks going down and see how it responds to the paper's humidity. And if it doesn't respond favorably, then you could either use a hairdryer just to dry it a little bit or wait. On this shutter, I see a little bit of the metal structure for the washing line. So that's why I reserved the lighter area of that shutter as I painted around with the green. Anywhere else where I could put this gray green in? Well, yeah, up here, I can put that straight in, no messing, down to my washing line. I'm using that size 12 synthetic because it gives a nice crisp line. I just feel the crisp line is useful. So I put that on now. I got a few little splatters of green paint over the paint. It doesn't really matter. What I'll do is I will lift those out and show you how to do that so that if it ever happens to you, you know what to do. I'm painting my shutters in, and I'm reserving the light there, a little bit of that light on, you see the cable going across. like so. Right, so what happens if you make an error like that? A splodge goes down in your painting. Well, you could just leave it, or you clean your brush like I'm doing and lift it out. Viridian is quite a heavy staining pigment, so best not to leave it too long. But as you notice, it's lifting out, so no permanent damage done at this stage. I'll put in the other shutter. I add a little bit of blue there to the sort of green, because this shutter, for whatever reason, it seems to be more distressed than the other ones. So I just add color down to the washing line like so. Maybe a bit more gray to the green, a bit of blue. Seem to be cooler, bluer grays to me at least. And so I'm just going to respond to that as I see it, or as I feel I see it. There we go. And you'll notice you'll get a certain amount of pull with the colors sort of moving out into the paper, hopefully. Right, so that's good. I've got those green shutters partly painted. Now I clean my brushes and I go to the next area that needs some color. And for me, I think the next area will be the shirts and the sheet. So I may as well start with the sheet, because that's a sort of lavender gray. So I could use my blue, that's cerulean blue, or I could use a little bit of violet and blue. That's a nice combination. So I'll just start with that, and I'll just paint that bluey, purpley color, lavender color. And I'm also thinking about the movement, you see, in that sheet. Do you see? So I'm painting a little bit of a feeling of the billowing nature that we have with materials that are hanging down like that. If I paint into an area I didn't want to paint into, I just lift it out with a clean synthetic brush. And I may as well make I know in the picture that the sheets are different colors, but I'll just make this one a little bit more purpley blue by adding this tea wash of purpley tone. And it doesn't hurt if, while it's wet, you add a little bit of stronger tone of blue, maybe French ultramarine blue. That would be a good blue to use in the shadows, and a bit of pink. So I can push the feeling of the blue light within that sheet. And you might want to put pinks and blues in, depending on your stylistic bent, and it will be fun and nice to capture some of those violet tones within the shadow of the sheet, because that's what we're seeing. And notice I just put a few little lines, just to try curvy lines to convey the curve of the sheet. And then I clean my brush, soften my brush, dry it by drying it, and tickle some of the edges that I want to turn towards the light, because there is an edge quality to turning the color to the light. You'll usually have a hard edge where the shadows meet a light, but when you've got the form shadow turning to the light, it'll soften, because light is alive. It moves with the sunlight. So it has a little buzz to it, which is nice. Okay, I'm going to move on now to the t-shirts below. So they're all sort of grey browns and things. So I could use the purpley tone on one of them. That would be okay. You also see a sort of mauvey purpley tone on one of them. That's going to be fun. So a bit of red into your purple and maybe a touch of grey. And that'll contrast nicely with the green, the viridian green, because you get a little bit of that mauvey purple colour. But just check to see how wet that painting is in those areas before you commit. If it's very, very wet, wait. If you've got it starting to dry, you could go in. I'm going to put some greys, stronger greys. And these are all coffee thickness, so it's not going to be too dark as I put these shapes in. And if you want to put a variation of blues and things in, you can. It's your painting. So that's what I'm doing. I'm adding a little bit more blue here and there. But mostly they are greys. I see one with a sort of brownish note. Maybe with a bit of orange. So have fun mixing some of the colors you feel you're seeing in these areas. And there is a purple one, which is going to be very, very violet. And I'm pretty much there with that. And again, just watch the edges here and there. If they're starting to get a bit hard edged in places and maybe some colors going to zones you didn't want it to go to necessarily, you can lift those areas, clean your brush, dry your brush, and reserve those lights how you want them. Now I've got those tones in, I'm ready to start to think about moving to windows, because there are some windows and these are sort of light blues. So I just mix up some light blues. Like so. Again, they're still between sort of coffee and tea thicknesses, a little bit stronger, I guess, than tea. But for example, the lady's shirt here, she's got this sort of, it looks like a dark blue, but she's in the sunlight, so don't make it too strong, but coffee thickness would be fine. She's got white trousers. So I will deal with that exactly as I dealt with the sheets up here. I'll use a little bit of purpley blue. So purpley blue is, and a touch of grey. And for small details like this, I tend to use a synthetic brush because you get a finer sort of shadow shape. There it is. So a little bit of shadow on her white trousers. The back of them, as it were. And I'm going to add her skin tone in as well, which is an orangey pink. So a little bit of orange. So if you're running out of wells, not a bad idea to just clean one up a little bit. I'll use this one here that I used for the walls, because the next wash will be browns, oranges anyway on the stucco. Pop the brush down, I can't find it. It's rolled away somewhere. Where did that go? We've got another one. So for the skin tones, start with an orange, a little bit of pink, maybe a bit of burnt sienna or cad red. It's up to you, really. And then when you feel that you have something resembling a skin tone, there it is, then paint on the left-hand side of the hands, the face, and then just lift a little bit of that light on the right-hand side. So just soften that edge, because what's happening is the highlight is hitting her arm and her face from the sun. So it gets a little bit lighter there. For her hair, I'm just going to use some brown. And I think I mentioned brown and grey, Payne's grey. I mentioned that there is a lighter tone on the top of her head. So I don't paint that necessarily, but I'll paint to the side of it. Because it's wet, be careful, because you might just end up with a grey head there. So be careful as you dot that in, that it doesn't just bloom into the area where you've reserved pinks. And that's a good start for the figure. Everywhere else should now start to settle down a little bit, and you'll notice you've got lovely kind of textures, maybe a little bits of bloom, but it won't be a problem having a little bit of a bloom, because you know what? These textures on the walls are quite heavy with the oxides. So if I add a bit of orange and pink again, this time going slightly stronger, and let's just see what that will look like when I add it to the wall. And yeah, as you can see now, as I add this to the wall, I'm getting textures. I'm using a quick brush stroke. What I mean by that is you could emulate it by holding the brush like this and just dragging the side of the brush. But because my paper is still moist, not quite dry, it's creating textures here and there, which are ranging from soft to hard. And sometimes we refer to this as broken edged, because it's got more quality. But if it's all too hard, the edge in this milky thickness wash, then you could spray it just ever so lightly like this, and then you'll see you'll get little textures again. So there's lots to play with there. And I'll just put a bit of this orangey pink between the window frames. So this is the window frame of the only window that's open that we can see, shutters that are open. Now I'm going to add a little bit of pink again to this orangey tone and a little bit of grey, because what I'd like to do now, too much grey. What I'd like to do now is to add a little bit of tone on this wall, because this wall has slightly warmer, cooler, sorry, stucco, which has a dirty pink kind of grey wash to it. And I'm just creating those sort of textures by adding a darker wash of the initial mix. So it's just crimson with grey and a little bit of that same orange mix we used over there. And if any of the edges seem too hard to be convincing, just soften them with a clean brush. So clean your brush and tickle the edges and just vary those textures, and that then will go backwards into the picture again and won't present a problem for you. So in this phase, we're actually just creating textures. Okay. So I've got more orangey textures. And here and there, as I mentioned, it's various different thicknesses. I've got more pink textures, pink grays, and here and there, you know, on top of what we've previously painted, there's other textures of the same color, but slightly stronger. And now I move down to these grays, because the grays have a different texture as well. So I've got my gray down here, and I added to it just a small amount of either burnt umber or raw umber, whichever you've got, and you'll end up with this dirty brown, which will be a dirty brown gray, which will be perfect for the stucco. It's textured in the gray area, which was pretty much the rest of the picture. But allow some of the underpainting gray to exist and add a smaller amount of this distressed gray, brown tone. So it doesn't need to be everywhere. I'm going to paint that down here on the left-hand side of this awning, into the window shape, down to the ground here. Maybe a little touch of orange. There we are. I think I've got my lights, mid values to middle values in the stucco wall. That's what I think. And you can see by now that there is this kind of stage of the process where you're building up the lights gradually. And I think that this is the most exciting part of your painting personally, because what's happening here is we're creating the effects of the light. These are the light tones. They might look a little bit dark compared to everything else at the moment, but once we start to put the real, truly shadow dark tones in, you'll see that these will be most obviously lights again. So there we are. I have the background tones there. Now I need to move forwards a little bit or downwards a little bit into the shop area. So I'll put more tones in there as well. So I can pick up these warm colors and I can start to expand some tones here and there in the shadows. Like so. And yet again, I will soften the edges. Don't want them to be hard edged in the shadow. I want them to be vague. To be fair, I want my eye to wander, not to be drawn. I can see a bit of brown, so I'll pick some brown up and I'll put this around my character. So if I add some gray to that brown, it's milky thickness now, so a bit thicker than the tea and the coffee in these shadowy areas. So I've got another wash tone now. It's going a little bit darker in that shadow. I can even start to use that to draw the shapes in the windows as well. You'll probably see that they're darker shapes in there as well, but I'll get those the next time round. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just building up textures and ideas that could exist in that shadowy shape that is underneath the awning. So you see what I did? I just playfully painted over those areas. Once you've done that area, then you might want to move on to this area. So again, let's start with the grays. They can go right in, and the browns. They can go right into the areas around the t-shirts you've drawn. Into that doorway. Remember, there's that gloomy doorway that's most dark, and I can paint the steps. 1, 2, maybe even 3 steps within there. Now I can sort of add maybe a bit of crimson as well to warm things up here and there. I see quite a bit of golden browns within there, so I could use orange here and there just to have a bit of fun. And then maybe it's a bit cooler in places as well. It's not all that warm. They're not all warm tones in there. There's some grays, so I could use a bit of gray, maybe even a touch of blue, dark blue in those grays, so that between here and there, between my various items that I have in my display, there might be cooler notes within there. But I remember I have these light tones of the sunlight coming through, and I'm going to reserve them as they cascade through my painting. So as I paint around them with these, sometimes blue gray, sometimes even a bit of green gray, I'm going to reserve those lights. And have fun as you playfully mix your tones, trying to create a feeling of objects within that area. And added a bit of raw sienna, so I want to paint those those little wicker baskets. I'm imagining that they're wicker baskets. And then once I've painted those wicker basket shapes, I can go around them with this browny gray, so just basically burnt umber, maybe a bit of Payne's gray, maybe even a bit of blue, just to vary it. But I don't mix them a lot. I put them together and then I allow the paint to do its trick, its magic, which is to start to move towards each other and push each other around. The yellows will have an effect on the darks. The blues will have their effects on the warms. And you get this range of different expressions of paint because you're being playful with oranges, yellows, maybe crimsons. We've used a bit of purple in the sheets, so let's use them as well, maybe here and there on those t-shirts that you've got inside the shadows there. Maybe a little bit of blue in there as well. So blue purples, sort of violets in the darks. They can look great. And the interesting thing is that white t-shirts or any white item inside a shadow will look kind of purpley. So I'm now starting to paint around those t-shirts, and I don't mind it being a bit wet into wet. That's absolutely fine, but I must remember not to paint over those lemons, those lemon shapes, whatever they are. And it doesn't matter that we don't know what they are. It really doesn't. As long as there's some shape, abstract shape catching the light, it's going to give depth. And it's going to give some kind of explanation to what's going on in there, which is so necessary. But what's not necessary is that we know exactly what it is. So I'm adding a bit of a darker tone now. It's just Payne's gray. A little bit stronger. This time it's going, I've gone from milky now into creamy. So I'm going wet into wet there, and I'm really making that much stronger in those darks. And you see what it's doing here and there. The textures, while it's all wet into wet, all of this is starting to come to life. There's my little sack trolley there. I'm adding to the sack trolley's shape. It has two dark wheels, which I can join into the shadow shape. That's worked very nicely. Make sure I've got a nice crisp edge at the bottom of my awning there. Maybe even paint between the little gaps at the side of the awning here. See what that's done. And now, while I've still got this very dark grey brown, I can go back into this original shadow area and I can paint that window shape. You know, there's this dark window shape in there. And now the paint within this shape is still moist, but it's not soaking wet. And so I'm getting, by degree, a slightly more crisp feel. And I can even sort of try to make it look like there's a menu by drawing abstract sort of lettering or lines of shapes which would correspond with lettering. And whether you were doing an awning or whether, you know, it's any sort of restaurant will have menus with things on it. Maybe even at the market, you'll see signs with numbers and letters on it. And if you just treat it as an abstract shape like that, it'll hopefully work, you'll see. And I can bring that shadow shape just out tentatively towards the street there. Because it's not a straight line, is it? You've got a little bit of movement of these shapes as they sort of meander. This awning moves a little bit, and so the shadow has moved just ever so slightly. So that's working nicely. I'm starting to feel that's working. But I don't want to go too much further with that just yet. I'll let that sort of calm down a little bit, as it were. It does need another depth just to really anchor maybe our highlights in there. But now I can start to think about other areas, such as my shutters at the top here, the windows, shadows, etc. So in this area, I had gone from milky to creamy, but I missed a step up here. These need their milky step because they've had their tea and coffees. So now I need to put their milky thickness. Now on the shadow map, let me just bring the value map in again, just for a moment. On the sheets, you have three values you can see now. There's light, we've reserved that. There's light middle value, we've got a little bit of that. And then there's a middle value. That's the shadow on a white sheet is a middle value. So that's milky thickness. So let's see if we can manage that. And then we'll go into its shadow. So if I just bring this out, click on there, there we are. So this grey was achieved by reserving the white of the paper. Then I put in a tea and coffee thickness wash. I now need to go milky thickness, and it's going to be a grey because it's a white sheet. And now I get one more go because this is the final value. And just check that it's okay as I put this on. It might look very dark to begin with, but it'll settle down hopefully. And if not, we can lift it a little bit, but I'm following the shape of these billowing, curvy forms within the sheet. And there you'll see as I bring this down now from the flow of the material, it will then cast over the wall. So let it cast over the wall as well. Just there, that's fine. But then clean your brush. And then we're going to soften some edges. So these edges need to be softened. So clean your brush, dry your brush a little bit, and then just touch the edges. See how I dry my brush just by using my cloth? That's Very important. Like so. And that's good. I think that sheet's worked out very well. And now I go on to the pillar cases. I'll do the same with those, a couple of little lines. Not much, just a little bit here and there. And then I soften the edges on that as well. And now I'm going to start to put the shadows from the sheets across the wall. But that's going to come in the next stage because I want to put some tones on my shutters. And they need to be addressed, and they are milky tones as well. So the shutters are here. They've got coffee thickness green. There's my green. So let's add more green this time, a little bit more green, a little bit of gray, a little bit stronger. And let's see if we can make a milky gray tone. But I might just add a little bit of brown to this just to warm it up because the green is quite cold. So a little bit of brown into the grey green, and look, you see the strength of that? And you check out the strength and see if it's giving you the feeling of those little slatted lines going this way and that. And it's kind of a rectangle shape that it's made within the frame of the shutter. And then there is a gap that you will find, like a strengthening bar between these little shutters. And that's where I'm moving this now. Like so. I'll do the same on this one. So a little bit darker. It's just green, brown, and grey. Milky thickness, something like that. You can see it's quite thick. It's not totally opaque, but it's not far off. And then on this particular blind down here, it goes the other way. So I'm just going to invert the pattern this time. I'm painting the outside edge of the window shutters frame. Like so. This little crossbar. Like so. I'm going to add a little bit of violet to the green. And I've added a little bit of water because this one, for whatever reason, I'm not quite sure it's the sunlight maybe hitting it directly. It does seem slightly lighter. So I just vary that mixture, and it's got a sort of bluey purple note in the grey green. So I'm just responding to that a little bit. And you can actually see the little slats on this one. So I'm also responding to that, trying to keep them sort of in a similar perspective to what I'm seeing, although my camera angle is a bit strange. So I'll just stand up to do this. There we go. So that's that one's kind of sorted. And the same with this one. So I'm putting the little slots, trying to keep it in perspective with what I'm seeing, because that will help. And then Doing the same on the other shutter because it's not too far off on that one as well. It's very similar. So I'll just paint through those. I've done that one, that's good. And there goes the second layer on the shutters. Now, going back up to this window up here, you'll notice there's a shadow coming down across the glass. Now, for that, I'm just going to use French ultramarine blue, so back into my blue well. So at the moment, I've got a sort of a grey well, a green well, and now I've got a blue well. And this is where I'm going to start to now bring a blue-grey shadow, milky thickness, something like that. And I'm going to cast that shadow across and through the window, like so. But see how it steps over the wooden frame in the glass? Sort of, you have to sort of playfully step over it because it's a different plane. Glass is flat and then this wood just sort of comes out a little bit. So just go around that. And now I'm certainly ready to put my shadows coming across the wall underneath my sheets and underneath these various other things. So that's good. Now, when we're making the shadow tone, it does vary. And when we look, it is a grey brown. So if I've got this sort of grey here with a little bit of brown, that's going to be fine. So I'm going to keep the shadow sort of grey brown. So I'm going to use raw umber in my brown because it's got a little bit more of the golden light. If you don't have raw umber, you can use your burnt umber and a little bit of raw sienna, and that will give you that golden brown tone. It's a golden grey brown. But if you don't have the raw sienna, you could use yellow ochre. That would do it as well. But you're going to vary it here and there because you can have burnt sienna in that shadow. And you see it there. There's some burnt sienna, I feel, here. And this has got to be milky thickness. As I put this on, you'll probably see how dark it is. And it paints to the edge of the sheet and it will cast over my shutter. Like so. It will go under the sheet here and cast down over the wall with a sort of billowing shape. I'm also seeing it over here underneath this window ledge coming down at the side of the pillowcases. Anywhere else? Yes, I am seeing this on the window sills here, lintels. And I'm also seeing it below this shutter over here. And for this painting, I'm going to keep these shadows the same color pretty much, just because it shouldn't be too difficult then to match. And underneath the pillowcase here, coming down, the shadow on the wall is cast there. It joins the line. So there is this washing line. I'm going to paint the shadow of the washing line cutting across the wall. Do you see that? And a couple of little dots here and there for the, you know, you have those little pulleys on the line, I believe, there and there. You just put them here and there, and a couple of lines with your thin brush, if you like, just to create the washing line. You see it's happening. So in this stage, we are now locking in the shadow shapes on the walls. We're following our drawing. Remember, you did a lovely drawing of the pillowcases and the shadow of those pillowcases. It's casting down here now. into the window, over the shutter. So there it goes. In between these two shutters that are open, you can see some curtains but you only see the shadows of the curtain. So I just paint the same color and then down into the shadow of the window where it sort of comes together, where the two gaps of the gap is between the two shutters. There's a void. I just fill that with the same color. Might add a little bit of crimson. I know I said I wouldn't vary it too much, but you could add a little bit of crimson into the color now as we track downwards, because these green blinds, they need a bit of a warmer tone in the shadow. So I just add a little bit of crimson into it, just around the washing line here. I've got this raking shadow coming from my green Venetian blind, shutters there, sorry, and then down leading towards my washing. Always coming towards that washing. That's what I'm after. And this washing has a line as well. It has little shadows, raking shadows across the wall. I'm going to playfully put those in as I put in this big shadow. We've been waiting for that shadow to go in for ages. Like so. Now I pick up the other shadows from the t-shirts, etc. I'm going to paint those on the wall. I added a bit of that raw sienna because I like the look of this sort of golden brown going on down here. And now I'm knitting the shadows across the wall. That's what I'm doing. We've drawn that in. We took a bit of our time over that, so they should be okay. So just follow your drawing. Every now and then, vary the tone of the grey. You could add a little bit of green in, you could add a little bit of warm in there. But it's mostly coming from raw sienna mixed with a little bit of Payne's grey mixed with whatever you want to add as a warming note or a cooling note. So you can see now, look, I'm getting a bit of transparency, and it's the raw sienna that gives me the transparency that I am reading in there. But you won't manage it so well with yellow ochre, unfortunately, if you've had to use that, because it's not very transparent. And every here and there, a few little scratchy lines between the individual vestments in this color. And you'll see suddenly, oh yes, that explains what that is, hopefully. So you're just knitting it all together. And by now you're starting to get an effect. Hopefully it's working well for you. And if it isn't, keep going with it. It's likely you've got a drawing issue. But I'm very optimistic that you're likely to be starting to see now your work is happening to get more depth, and your cast shadow is starting to do what you wanted it to do, which is to bring things forward. Now I use that same color. Going to very quickly draw some electric cables which are on the walls. There's all sorts of little bits and bobs that are running slightly above. I'm using my rigger brush now, and these are these little lines, and they're just going to add textures to my painting, which is just going to give me a really nice, you see what I do? I just go back and forth creating the electric cables, which they tend to paint nail on the outside of the wall because it's easier than going through these very thick walls they have in Italy. And I'll also paint a little shadow underneath each of my, you see the window sills, and there's a hinge on the side of each of the shutter. I can put a bit of that shadow color there, and suddenly you've got details there. Here and there on the sides of all of the areas, and anywhere you see these shadows of iron bars that have been bolted into the wall or nailed through, or however they've been fashioned. And it's starting to now feel like what we're seeing. I'll also bring this down, this same color, using my rigger brush to create a feeling of how the awning is attached to the wall, and this wonderful side canopy that is coming out from the wall, you see. And each time you paint something like this, they're all different somehow. They're all same but different. And it's knowing how to get a feeling of that material. So sometimes just letting your grip of your brush dangle a little bit as you move it, that will help. So that's working. I'm going to paint my silhouette shape of my little sack truck. It's been waiting there. Going to get a little flat brush. If you've got a flat brush at hand, we're going to put the framed grid of that window in. So you pick up that paint with a flat brush and you just allow those toothy shapes to happen, leaving a little grid between them. You don't have to be too perfect with it to get the feeling and the effect. In fact, a little bit of looseness really helps. You see, and it's virtually the perfect brush because it's drawing it as it paints it. And then there's all these little shapes, and just playfully add the textures that you think, that you feel here and there with that brush. And while I've still got this flat brush, I'll just put a few little flat brush shapes into the gloomy, shadowy shape areas. And that's pretty much our middle values. And we're moving into a darker middle value next. Now, oh, just before I do that though, on the ground here, on the ground plane, if you remember, we put a raw sienna wash, tea wash, then we had a little bit of a coffee wash for the stones, and it's kind of faded a little bit. It does do that sometimes when you move from lights to light middle values to middle values. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spray that up a little bit because it's bone dry now. So what I did is I just put my hand over and sprayed. So very quickly, not too close, but obviously I need to create an effect of a damp tone. So now I can use a little bit of bluey grey. And you'll see what I'm going to do. I'm going to start to create a feeling of these slabs again, because they have dried out a little bit. And I'll take a little bit of that sort of brownish tone as well. And I'm looking at the angle that the pathway is proceeding in front. So it kind of goes from this point on the clock, radiating to this point on the clock here. So if you don't know what I mean by that, don't worry. If you sign up for future classes, I will explain perspective and how to achieve a feeling of perspective in your work. But those of you know what I'm talking about, you start to radiate this way with these tones. You can kind of paint them squarish as well. It's not a problem. And stagger the bricks, the stone slabs from one another. Give a little bit of a space. Some of them are cool and some of them are warm, but they are quite light. So let's not go too dark. I know I've been doing some dark areas, so be careful with that. And if in doubt, just soften it a little bit here and there like I'm doing. There we go. And I'll just watch that as it transpires, because all of these things are textures that are going to build as the paper starts to settle down. So I can probably add a little bit more to those later. But there we go. I think I've got through to my dark middle values now. So this area has got some middle values in it and a couple of dark middle values. I put those dark middle values in there, but everywhere else is pretty much there. So what's a dark middle value? Well, if I click up again, the value map, all of the areas under the canopies pretty much are dark middle values with dark accent. We've got some dark middle values underneath as shadows, so I'm going to put a few in there. And then we've got our dark accents underneath those open vented shutters. And then we're pretty much then left with dark accents in the areas underneath the awning. So what does that mean then? Well, it means we're very close to finishing. And I'd like to explain that when you're painting like this, what you're kind of doing is you're imitating a similar process as what the medieval artists did when they made stained glass windows. They were creating a luminosity with the glass and the light behind it. You're creating a luminosity with the colors, pure pigments or purish pigments on the white paper. To get more contrast, we go darker, but you saw in the value map, it's only a small area of very heavy darks. So I'm just going to add a dark middle value. So it's just brown and grey, creamy thickness here and there around the shadows of my t-shirts and things. Do you see there's a few little areas where there's sort of darks nearest and behind the shadow behind the t-shirt, between the shadow and the t-shirt, there's little dark areas. Do you see that? So this is where this creamy thickness goes. They're very small percentages of the painting, like, you know, not even at 1%. They're tiny areas. You might find it also on stretched shadows like this. There'll be areas where it gets darker. Here, underneath the very light pillowcase, it gets darker. Over the shutter shadow, you know, the pillowcase drops a shadow over the corner of that shutter, and that might be just a little bit darker. So I just accent it a little bit more. Inside the gap between the two shutters, it's darker in there as well. So I'll put a bit more in there. So you respond to what you see here and there, making it a little bit darker with the darker accent, maybe even on the walls. Like, for example, the cable is casting a heavier shadow where it crosses another cable. And over here, there might be a cable crossing another cable, you see, and you can just pull it forward visually by putting this darker accent along the previous ones. And then where these bolts stick in the wall, you might find a darker accent where it sort of goes into the wall. So these are little tips. Your painting's very close to finish now. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've been overwhelmed, that will be because you're new to watercolors. But after following the program, you'll get better and better. I take on easier subjects than this, but of course I wanted to show you where this can lead you, and I'm hoping that you might be interested in signing up. And if you are, that's brilliant. If not, don't worry. I hope you enjoy learning more about watercolors, however you do it. But you can see by now that this process is working, and it's been through a 5-value map. Now I'm going to creamy thickness. So this is pretty much neat brown, neat black. Well, it's Payne's grey. And I'm going to fire in some darks into these openings. See here and there. Just want to, and these really are the shadow accents that really are the darkest darks in this whole painting. There's not many of them, but underneath this awning, you will find them in the corners, closer to the top, for sure. Around our lady who's been waiting very patiently to be finished off, which I'm going to do shortly, but I just put a little bit of this dark accent between her arm and the background. Paint her phone. A couple of little points in the shadows at the bottom of the canopy here. And then one last little trick before I go. What I'd like to do now is I'd just like to push those highlights inside there a little bit more and paint the cables with some white gouache. And then I think I've got what I came for. And what did I come for? Well, I wanted to get a feeling of the light coming through in here a little bit more. So I'm just going to water down the paint a little bit that I was using and create a wash around these highlights. So you see what happened there? I just glazed around them. And it just makes this area a little bit brighter. I've got my lemon, they're not lemons, are they? They're, you call them lemons. They're candles or something in a bucket or a barrel. I'm just going to make it a little bit darker nearest to that golden note, so they stand out a little bit more. And that's working. So the darker you go near a bright light object, such as those things, you create a higher contrast. And that's just a way of creating more of a feeling of depth. There we go. So that's helping. And now if I want to go any darker than that, I'm going to have to use my white gouache. So that's what's coming next. But a little shadow on the foot there, here and there, and creating a shadow between the lady and the wall is going to help. So her shadow sort of goes off behind and then joins in with the shadow shape inside that atmosphere underneath the canopy. That's worked. She's now stepping forward. Little accent between the legs there of the depth to give more depth. That's helped. Maybe a dark blue. So this is creamy thickness blue on her back. Just there because she's in the shadow. That's helped. And I'm going to get some white gouache to put a line of light. Maybe it will help here and there. Just do that now. I'm going to clean my brush. So I've got some white gouache and I'll just add it in little cable. In there. Anywhere else, maybe just in the lights here. You see that raked light? I wanted to capture that. As I painted it, I inadvertently touched into it with paint. So now I use the gouache to lift it again. So there it is, got the light. And here and there, I've got these areas of light that not quite sure what they are really. They're kind of like little flags or something hanging down inside the shop. But there we go. That's helped. And put the lid back on. Just a little bit more tone on the pathway, just to bring a feeling of more depth. I think that's it. So I'm going to pretty much stop the share at this point. Stop the recording. Oh, yeah, one more thing with that flat brush, a little bit more dark. So this is creamy thickness. Remember, we've got to put our dark accent. We've done it in the shop. That's good. But I almost forgot there is another area for it, which will be underneath this open shutter. Remember that shutter that's open here? That just needs a bit more depth because that's the dark accent. And when you get this in, it's going to really then pop in that area, which is what we need. And in here, and just there. That's giving that a bit more depth. And I think I am, give or take, there. So there we are. Right, so you'll always spot something there. There's another one up there, of course, I'd forgotten that one. So those shutters were open as well, weren't they? So this is thick paint. This is how it comes out of the tube. Creamy thickness, buttery thickness. And that's going to really pull the eye into the gloom inside of that shutter, at least part of the way. And then we are there. Right, so I'm going to stop there.